You're listening to The Upland Rookie, a podcast presented by Upland Brits, B Pro Kennels, and Final Rise. Big thanks to our title sponsor, B Pro Kennels. B Pro Kennels is a small business creating ultra high quality and custom dog boxes for the gun dog owner like you and I. No matter how big your string of dogs, B Pro Kennels will make sure you have a box that fits your needs for you and your gun dogs. With an innovative storage design and built-in solar panel and battery bank for quick access to charging accessories like dog collars, lights, fans, you name it. This is a dog box unlike anything you've seen before. Check them out at bprokennels.com. Oh, and they're made right here in the USA. This podcast is also presented to you by Final Rise. All good things start with a solid foundation. At Final Rise, all three of their premium Upland vests are built around the foundational waist belt to provide you all-day comfort and endless customization. With a secure waist belt and thin, high-quality shoulder harness, this is the vest that you can load down with birds and walk all day in. Final Rise is creating high-functioning Upland gear that delivers comfort, balance, and a lifetime of memories. Check them out at finalrise.com. And this podcast is sponsored by Trinity Bretons, home of the Épagneul Breton, also known as the French Brittany. All Trinity Breton dogs are from champion bloodlines that are field-tested and family-approved. For over 33 years, Trinity Bretons has worked to offer you the best bred Épagneul Breton in the country. Trinity offers puppies, the Trinity Upland Academy with George Hickox, started dogs, stud services, and a whole lot more. Check them out at trinitybretons.com. And don't forget about the fall kickoff giveaway happening over at patreon.com. Become a Patreon supporter for as little as $5 a month, and not only helping support the podcast, but you will be entered into the giveaway, including prizes from Cable Gangs, Upland Knife Company, and Gunner Kennels. Check it out and become a Patreon member today at patreon.com/The Upland Rookie podcast. Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Upland Rookie Podcast. I'm your host, Will Larson, and this is episode 56 with Jeff Ruiter of Trinity Kennels. I'm going to get into more of our conversation here in just a second and set the stage. You know what? I might as well do that now because I've already brought it up. So I'm chatting with Jeff Ruiter here today of Trinity Kennels, and I have already talked with his son Josh several episodes back. I think episode 24. We do a deep dive just into Trinity Kennels as a whole, some of the stuff that they have going on over there, some of their dogs, talk a lot about moose. But Jeff and I on this episode, we do a much deeper dive into breeding, and specifically COI, coefficient inbreeding, versus line breeding. And we get into the weeds pretty deep into the breeding philosophy and methods, not only that Trinity is using, but Jeff has just been a wealth of knowledge here that I've gotten to know for several years now. And him and Josh both just have such experience and a really, really awesome way to communicate with new dog owners and people who are just interested or have questions. And so I really, really appreciate this conversation with Jeff. I told him before the podcast, I said, the whole COI and coefficient inbreeding, line breeding, it was kind of a black hole to me. It seemed a little more intense, and it still kind of is. So I was like, how can we break this down for regular people like me and you to understand? And I think you did a fantastic job of being able to unpack and break down some of the breeding methods and even some bloodlines and genetics and a whole bunch of stuff. You guys I think are really going to enjoy this one. We also do kind of a rabbit hole sidetrack into training and some of the things they have going on with the Trinity Upland Academy with George Hickox. So I think you guys are really going to enjoy this one. So that's what is coming up. But I have a little bit of an intro to do first. Just to get this out of the way, don't forget to sign up on patreon.com to be a Patreon supporter. As little as $5 a month will get you into all the giveaways, get your name in the hat 2 times. If you want to up it to the mid tier, they'll get your name in the hat, I think 5 times. And the upper tier will get your name in the hat for all drawings 10 times. So some really cool opportunities. There's not a ton of Patreon members yet, which is nice for you guys because your chances of winning are still very, very high. So I'm going to be drawing the winner and announcing the name on September 1st. So get your Patreon membership in, or become a Patreon member in the month of August, and you will be entered into the giveaway. So there's 3 prizes up for grabs still: cable gangs, tie-out system, a knife from Upland Knife Company, and a Gunner fan kit 2.0. So some awesome prizes still up for grabs. Go over to Patreon. Okay, one thing I said I would do on last week's episode is talk about some puppy stuff, some puppy info, some things that I have, again, just personal things that I've learned along the way. I talked a little bit about this way back when, maybe episode 2 or 3 or something like that. So I got a new puppy. His name is Mac. He is doing well. He's a little fireball right now. He's 9.5, maybe 10. I think he'll be 10 weeks old, maybe tomorrow. I'm not sure. But yeah, he's doing well. And I think it's important as a reminder. I know a lot of people pick up dogs either in the fall or spring. It depends. I typically will pick up dogs in the fall, it seems like. I don't know why. It just kind of happens that way. Might not be ideal, but I got one in the summer, which this works out kind of well. So a couple things I wanted to go over with puppies. Again, maybe this is helpful for you. Maybe it's not. If it doesn't interest you, just skip to the interview. But I'm going to give you a bullet point list of a couple of things that I am working on with Mac right now. And I'm not really doing anything besides what's on this list. You don't need to make this more complicated than it is. You don't need to stress yourself out. Don't need to stress your dog out. And so it may seem pretty simple. You might get through my list that you hear and go, that's it? That's all you're doing? Yep. That is all I'm working on right now. So a couple things. Someone actually just asked me this question recently, was how to introduce the puppy to older dogs. Bird intro, food, crate training, potty training, hear command with the clicker. So those are kind of things that I am focusing on with the new puppy. Again, this is kind of a plan that I've set for myself, for my dogs, and it has worked well in the past. So this is kind of what I'm following with Mac as well. Now, again, with every stage and as they get older, this will change. But when I'm thinking brand new puppy, first, I don't know, month or 2, I don't know. Again, this is kind of loosely. This is kind of the things I'm focusing on. So introducing to older dogs, you don't want to stress the puppy out, and you don't want to just turn them loose and turn the older dogs loose in the room and let them have at it. Pup's going to get kind of freaked out. They're big dogs. It's new environment. Again, you just have to take the puppy into consideration. This is all new for him. He left his litter mates, left his whatever, his environment he was used to. So it's all going to be new. So keep that in mind in all these things that you consider with a new puppy. So what I did with Mac was I introduced him to Win and Gage separately, one at a time. And I actually held Win and Gage. So I held Gage by the collar, just kind of petted him and let Mac kind of sniff him around. And he was curious. Then he walked away. Then he came back. Did that for a little bit. Once Gage was settled and comfortable, the puppy seemed comfortable. And then I let Gage, loose. He went and sniffed Mac a little bit. They kind of ran around, and it was kind of no big deal. It was kind of a non-event. It wasn't this huge ordeal. It was, they got to sniff each other. Gage was like, all right, who's this young guy? Can he point birds? Cool. He's on the team. And did the same thing with Win separately. And I think of only a couple times they've been all together, because again, they can get pretty rowdy, but he's been old enough now. We've had him long enough where, I can have all 3 of them run around in the garage and it is no big deal. So again, a non-event, just make it casual. Just make sure the puppy doesn't get trampled. Okay. A couple more things. Bird intro. So bird intro, I am no expert on official bird intro for things, but I talked with Jeff Hoskins about this on the podcast a while back. I like to see a puppy point early. I like to see that in a young pup. I like to know that they have that instinct in them very young. Does not mean if your dog does not point early that they're not going to point. I don't believe that. But I have done wing on a string. I've done it twice with Mac, and he's pointed really nice both times. So I know there's lots of thoughts and opinions on that. I've heard some people say it'll ruin a dog. I don't believe it to be true. Maybe if you do it 100 times, maybe it's going to cause some issues or problems down the road. But 1 or 2 times when they're really, really young, I don't think is a big problem. Again, I like to see that point. I like just see what they'll do with that wing scent. And if they see it a little bit too, that's fine. That's part of the game. So again, I've done that. Now I'm going to be working with Jeff a lot more on introing live birds and what that looks like. But then again, that won't be for a little while. He has seen our pigeon coop and chicken coop and all that, but he seemed great with it. Okay. Food, crate training, potty training. So potty training, this is a kind of a big one, is potty training. Biggest advice I guess I could give with potty training is take up water a little bit before bed, like a few hours before bed. So we'll take it up maybe 2 hours at least before bedtime. And it really, really helps the potty training. It helps the overnight time period. You still have to get up, let him out of his crate, all that good stuff. But if you're letting him guzzle water up until 30 minutes before you put him in his crate for the nighttime, you're going to be up in another little bit, letting him out like in another hour, because he's going to fill up his bladder. He's going to have to pee. So just be smart and strategic about when you're offering your dog water. Again, if you're going out for 3-4 hours, maybe don't offer him a ton of water an hour and a half before you go. So again, just be strategic about it, and just consistency. You got to be consistent with letting him out. I've been setting alarms for myself still. He's doing fairly well. He's had a few accidents here and there, but because I've overslept through my alarm. So set yourself some alarms, be consistent, and just be conscious about the water. Crate training. So crate training is a big one. I love to start that pretty early. Again, it's kind of similar to the here command with the clicker. So all crate training I'm doing as once they go in their crate, they get a click on the clicker and a treat at the same time. These dogs are den animals, and for them to have a safe, quiet space for them to kind of retreat and relax in their crate is really, really key. And so, we got a bunch of kids running around our house when I'm at work during the day. So if he's not in his dog run, my wife will put him in the crate, and it's a spot that he knows he can be calm and safe, and he gets food in there. It's a really important thing for a dog to learn. And you want a dog that can go in their crate and learn to, settle. It's time to settle down. Yeah, you're going to cry for a little bit and whine, but if you're consistent and don't let him out when he's whining, Mac has picked up very, very quickly that crate is cool, like chill time. It's not time to freak out. Sure, the first couple of days he howled his little butt off, but week and a half in, he picked it up pretty quick that he's not getting out if he howls and cries and all that stuff. So, again, a crate is just a safe spot for them and for you. They're not going to get in trouble. They're not going to chew things. They're not going to eat things that they're not supposed to. If you're not able to watch the puppy and be with them, focused, put them in the crate, or if you have ability to put them in a dog run, do that. But highly, highly recommend, getting them crate trained, get them used to the crate, Sorry, I can't talk sometimes. So just, I can't say that enough. So beating a dead horse. Same with here. I already have started the recall command here. Again, same thing with the clicker and treat. Mac here. He comes in my hand, gets his treat, click on the clicker. Really simple. It's just marking that behavior. Some people say, well, why don't you just say good or good boy? Way to go, Mac. The clicker is just, it doesn't change. The clicker has no emotion behind it. The clicker is the same every single time. And so no matter if you're having a good day, bad day, I don't say anything. I just treat, click, every time he does the behavior I want. And so it's just marking that behavior. So that's why I use the clicker. It's a pretty effective tool. I know Standing Stone Kennels has a bunch of videos online and on YouTube of how to do the clicker training properly, what it does, what it isn't, all that good stuff. So check out them if you want to go deeper and more info on the clicker. But I am a big believer in it. And I think we talked about that a little bit on this podcast episode with Jeff Ruiter as well. So that's about it, guys. That's kind of the puppy stuff that I'm focusing on. Again, I'm just trying to enjoy it right now. I mean, he's going to be coming with me on our first hunt in the beginning of September. And he's going to be learning a lot of new things. And so getting him used to the crate, getting him consistent on his food, recall, like all those things. Again, it's not going to be, perfect by any means. He's going to whine a little bit in the crate. He's not going to listen to his name sometimes. I get that. But it's just preparing him, getting him used to some of these things that he's going to be needing to do in life. And so coming along on a hunt, obviously he's not going to hunt whatsoever, but he's going to learn how to travel well. He's going to learn how to be on a cable gang tie out system. He's going to learn all sorts of things just being along for the ride. So expose your dogs appropriately in the appropriate time. Don't rush things and just enjoy it. Just enjoy the time that you have with your dog when they're little. Take lots of pictures like kids. Take lots of pictures as they are young because they'll go by fast. They're going to be a bird machine out in the field, doing all the cool stuff very, very soon. So really, I'm just focusing on him being a good citizen, adapting to our house, our rules, all that kind of good stuff. So hopefully that was helpful to anyone who is still listening to this 15-minute intro. Hopefully that, again, hopefully you learned something. Maybe you have a new dog you picked up, or maybe you're picking one up soon. So anyways, we're going to jump in to the episode with Jeff Ruiter of Trinity Bretons, and I hope you guys enjoy.
Well, we'll kind of jump in here, Jeff. First off, put us on a map. Where are you talking to us from? And would you mind telling the listeners a little bit of who you are?
Sure. We are located in Otley, Iowa, which most listeners will have never heard of. It's located just outside of Pella, Iowa, which may get us a little closer to somebody who knows where we are. But if you threw a dart at the state of Iowa, we're just southeast of the center.
Okay.
So just southeast of Des Moines. Who we are, I am Jeff Ruiter. I started Trinity Kennels 33 years ago. We'll talk a little bit about that as we go forward. My career has been in manufacturing management and change management. And so my dogs have always been an aside for me. The safe place, the place where you go to unwind after work, whatever. So I've done it for a long time, had them for a long time, and really enjoyed them. As far as our kennel goes, kennel is located on our property. It's in the country. So we have room to work the dogs there, but we also have several locations that we lease. So we have other places to work the dogs as well throughout the year.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I've been out to your property, and it's beautiful. It is summertime, corn's up. It's a little slice of heaven right there.
Yeah, it is. It's fun.
It is nice. Hey, I got to ask, a couple weeks ago, you guys hosted, is it your second Trinity Upland Academy? Is that right?
Yeah, actually we just did 10 days straight with one of our friends and mentors, George Hickok's, training mostly our customers. There are a few people that join that are not, that have another breed or from another kennel, but want the training anyway. Yeah. So the weekend, sorry, I'm going to pivot just a minute to catch a picture of the calendar. So the 10th, 11th, and 12th was actually it's kind of like the advanced class that we teach. So, so we set it up so that year one, you come and what do I do with my dog from puppy to X, 8, 12 months of age. And then the next year we say, okay, now what do we do from here? How do we finish them out? And that was the second weekend. And then in between, Josh and myself and a couple of good friends, they've become, they start out as clients and now they're around a lot. They came to both. And in between, we also worked all of our kennel dogs and all of their dogs with George as well. So,
that's fantastic. So George just stayed out there the whole time.
Yeah, George stays at our house. We have
very cool.
We have an old farmhouse, but the basement is very cool, and we've kind of made one room into my wife calls it a bungalow. It's a little bedroom with a couch in it, and so on and so forth, living space. And when he comes out, he just stays. So
that's fantastic. So you've kind of set this up. It sounds like you're kind of set up almost two tracks, right? Like a newer track and then a little bit more advanced track. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. It's really interesting because I also talked to George about our kennel as a business as well, because he's been doing it his whole life, and he's always, things like, what are you offering? Why are you offering it? What is your customer asking for? So he and I can have good discussions on that being a businessman. But one of the things we noticed the first year is that the beginning is really good, but a lot of people would come to the class and then the beginning for most dogs probably ends 8, 9, 10 months. Didn't know where to go from there. So I took my dog through this training. What now? And some people, they want to do tests. We do mostly field trials and tests. We do some shows, but we have customers that do NAVDA, NASTRA,
Sure.
AKC, UKC. I'm sure we'll talk about moose at some time, but, accidentally went out and ran and won an American field event. So there's all different types.
Yeah. And
the rules are all different. And also, once my dog is to this stage, how do I take him to a finished, in my particular area of interest, state? And so we have, it's very intensive. And over the years of working with George, I think he's learned us and our customers more. And he's really learned that, the team that we have and the customers that we have, for the most part, are very hands-on. So we do a little bit of classroom, and then we'll go out and do a bunch of applications. And then we'll come back and say, okay, what did we learn? What questions do we have? What hangups did you see with each one of the dogs? How did they perform? What do we need to work on?
Yeah.
And taking it forward that way. So it's become very intensive and very engaged, if I can say it that way.
I was just going to ask you if you're finding a lot of your customers are more, or wanting to be more hands-on, kind of DIY themselves. Why is that? Do you think, is that just a generational thing? Is that just the customer base?
It's interesting because I got asked that question multiple times over the last 10 days. And in thinking about it, I was like, because when I got my first French Brittany's, I didn't even have a thought in my brain about having Trinity kennels. It was actually, after they were 2 years old, and a buddy of mine asked me, why don't you have a litter so I can have one? Because there weren't many around at the time. Thought kind of popped into our head of, hey, let's put a name to this and make it something a little bit more permanent.
Sure.
And it's just grown since there. But yeah, so back in that day, we went to some seminars. When I was young, I went to a Delmer Smith seminar. Delmer's still alive as far as I know, in his 90s. But yeah, we would go learn there and come back and do it ourselves. We had books, these things to teach us. And it's weird because back then, groups of us would get together that were hunters, and we would say, okay, let's train our dogs next Saturday to do whatever. Let's work on point drills. Let's work on retrieves. And we'd all get together and just kind of do it. People seem more afraid of that today. Okay. And I do smile about it because I've got 5 kids and I know you've got at least that many.
Yeah. One more on the way.
That's what I heard. Congratulations.
Thank you.
But, I see a lot of people just very, worried about what if I screw my dog up? And I'm like, well, you got all these kids. I'd worry more about screwing the kids up than the dog. The dog's easier to fix,
That's a good point. That's a good point.
Yeah. It's just kind of funny because people are very afraid of it. We had somebody at one of the 2 clinics, and I won't try to get too specific, but always was, well, are we sure that's what's going wrong? Are we sure that if we do this, it's not going to, how do we better analyze? And it's like, whoa, you're thinking way too much about this. A dog is a cause and effect animal. Something happens. This is the effect. That's what they remember, good and bad. So they kind of have 2 photo albums in their brain, if you can say it that way. One is, I do this, it's a good outcome. The other one is, I do this, it's a bad outcome. Whether it's, I go chase a skunk and I get sprayed, bad outcome. Family leaves the pizza on the table and I can sneak in and grab a piece. Good outcome for me, maybe not for the family, but they make snapshots of good and bad. And so a lot of, the learning is, hey, just how do you give them the right snapshots?
Yeah.
How do you teach them to win? And which is very critical in the development of the dog, because it used to all be discipline. It used to be at 6 weeks, you had to teach them to sit. And if they wouldn't sit, you'd smack them on the butt with a roll of newspaper and make them sit.
Sure.
And then next week you do this, and the next week, but everything was discipline. Now we teach them all how to win. And my daughter, I think, took some videos. I haven't viewed them yet, but we had one pup that a guy was picking up at the clinic. So kind of preemptively, we did the clicker work with him and had him doing some sequencing and some other things, at 10 weeks of age. And I think people were just blown away. How did you guys do that with a 10-week-old puppy?
Sure.
In a 10-week-old puppy, you're creating those images for the first time. So it's actually pretty easy.
Yeah. Because again, it's like you said, it's the good or the bad outcome. It's very simple, very black and white. for the dog.
And if you do that with a puppy, now their brain starts to work like, okay, how do I find a good solution for everything? So, they're out in the field and you're tapping them a little bit saying, hey, you're going the wrong way. They don't look at that as a bad thing. They look at that as a marker to say, okay, I got to look back and see which way we're heading.
Kind of like a cue, just for something to turn the cue off of.
It's funny that you use that because pre-cue and cue is what we use to train the dog. So the pre-cue would be the command. The cue is, hey, we're going to do it now.
Oh, okay.
And away they go.
Wow.
And they start to learn. Probably an easy way to say that is when we first start training them we do a clicker program, we call it. I don't know if you've been introduced to that or not, but
I have. I've used it a little bit.
Yeah, so we start out with a kennel. When they go in the kennel, we click a clicker that helps imprint in their mind something just happened, and then you give them a treat, which tells them, oh, the happening was good, and you start doing that. But you don't use any commands in the beginning. Okay, you just get them to do things, and they learn that if I start to work, I start to learn this is positive. So you start with a kennel, then you add a place board, and then you might add something for them to touch or something that they have to climb up on. And they start in their brain to process that positive message of I can win. So that when they're out in the field, it's not ever looked at as, whether you're talking to them, which we call singing, which is just making noise so they know where you're at. Sure. Or whether you're actually trying to get them to do something different, or you're trying to keep them from harm. They don't get upset about that or freak out or run off versus coming back to you. They all know, okay, I just got to figure out what I need to do. And that will be my solution, my positive outcome.
So you're kind of, it sounds like you're getting them to think through the problem, right?
Yes.
It's not a do this or else. It's you're kind of giving them, I don't want to say a decision, but you're allowing them that space and freedom to make a choice, right?
Yep. So the sequence I was just talking about, we did that a lot with the puppy. We had a kennel, a place board, and something to touch, which is a bottle of water. And once you get them to do each one of those things individually, you start putting them together. But then you don't have, you don't have to reward them every time. So what you do is you take them through the process, and they might like running in the kennel the best. It's the most fun. So you don't reward them for that one for a turn or two. And then they'll stop, and you can see them think about, okay, I got rewarded in 3 places. That one's not working. I wonder which one will work. So they'll go try the board. Did I get treated here? Nope, not the board. Okay, I'm going to go touch the bottle. Got treated there. Okay, now I got it. You can also use it to do that with them in sequence. I've done this with young puppies before where I'll get 3 or 4 things in a row. You get treated after you do all 4. So you run in and out of the kennel, run, stand on the place board, run, touch a bottle, run, jump on a box, and then come back to the kennel. When you re-enter the kennel, you get clicked and treated there. So it's teaching them to think through it at a very young age.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how those dogs, so in this class, some people who were at the class last year with very young puppies are coming in year 2, and those dogs are so biddable. There is nothing that freaks those dogs out.
I was just going to ask. So say someone's thinking through this and they go, okay, well, why? Like, what's the purpose of doing this with a 10, 12, 13-week-old puppy?
Yep. So part of it is you add boldness and you add the will to win, we call it. So I know I can win. I just got to figure out how. And then that translates to your field trainings in you have a very bold puppy and they're not afraid. They're not, okay, I go out here, I did something wrong, boss picked me up, set me back, or, I got a little tickle on my neck. I wasn't approaching something right. Or I'm running to the road and I'm getting a signal from the boss that that's not the right thing to do. I got to stay away from that. All those things that dog is not fearful. They're very bold. They just know I got to figure it out. Whereas we had a couple of puppies showed up where people took them home and they became the family house dog and probably hadn't seen much of the field since then. Their first time out at the clinic, they don't even want to go into grass that's higher than 4 inches tall. They've not seen it. They don't understand it. It makes them nervous. They haven't been clicker trained. They haven't been worked through the starting processes of a puppy. And so they're scared a bit of everything. Now, we showed people again, it's not the end of the world. You can pull them out of that. So we took some of them in and actually did clicker training with them. We took some of them, and we would put birds down for them. So I learned when I go into that tall grass, good things happen to me. I find birds, and so the next time they see tall grass, they're much less tentative. And by day 3, they're charging into that grass because they know somewhere out there in that grass is a bird. And I'm going to go find it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's all working through the positive versus, I look back at all the years I've done this, and I can remember guys literally putting a check cord on their dog and dragging the dog along through the field. Well, the dog didn't know what the field was. He didn't know there was birds out there. He didn't, to drag him along just freaked him out even more versus taking a step back and saying, okay, how can I teach this dog this is a positive thing?
Yeah. I got two more questions on this, if you don't mind. So one, is there a point where, so with a treat and reward, so clicker, treat, is there a certain age that you'll take that reward away and just use the clicker? Is there kind of like a sweet spot of where you'll take that away, or does that depend on the dog?
It's very dependent on the dog. We do start to do it, especially when we start to get into what we call questing runs. So you take a young dog out to the field. We usually do it on a four-wheeler. Some people do it on horses, but you take them out and you're trying to just teach them to go out there and find stuff, preferably birds, but let's, line them up at the edge of a field and let's go. And they take off and they're off hunting and they're having a good time. In the field like that, we usually don't use clicker or treat at all. Now, there's some reasoning for that. First of all, it's not predictable enough, and you're not always as close as you'd like to be. Young dogs like that may bust the birds the first times through.
Sure.
You just want them to go out there and be happy and go chase birds and have a good experience. And then we start to form the structure around that. So from then on out, we don't do much with clicker and treat training unless we see a dog. So there was one dog there this week that the dog was really smart and actually had good instincts, but for whatever reason was always fighting its owner. So it was just like, if you saw the owner handle, it was just like this constant battle. And, so we're trying to teach the owner how to get the dog out of that. It was very interesting how well that dog would respond to us. It took several days for it to stop fighting its master, and by fighting, I don't mean biting and all that, but,
Sure.
We say kennel, the dog would run in the kennel. She'd say kennel and the dog would, go the other way. I was like,
Sure.
well, what is this?
Sure.
So you can go back and one of the ways we help break that dog of that is we did some click treat.
Okay.
We're going to teach you something new here. We're going to start teaching you how to win. This is a positive. This isn't a fight. We're in this together. And I've got a couple of dogs that I'm going to be working with that just because of personality, and I don't feel they're bold enough right now, I'm going to take them back to clicker for a while, just to give them fun times. I'm getting treats. This is good, and rebuild their confidence, and help them to move forward faster and as a better dog.
Okay. That's fascinating. Wow. So you'll kind of bring them back to that place if you kind of need to get some good feelings, get some confidence back in them. Okay. That's awesome. And the other thing I was going to ask is, have you always been doing this, the kind of this training method, the clicker, this training philosophy that you were in and using now, or did that come later? Like, tell me a little bit about that.
It came much later. My first training manual was Richard Walter's book Gun Dog. There was nothing out there when I got, I do not come from a hunting and fishing family, so I'm the anomaly in my lineage. And so when I got my first one, it was like, well, I need to figure out how to do this. And so bought a book and started reading through it and training. And then, like I said, went to a couple of Delmer Smith seminars over the years. But a lot of those methodologies, like I was saying earlier, are very discipline oriented versus how can I win oriented. Not that a dog never gets in trouble, but we try to avoid the negative interaction and try to keep it as positive as possible with them. And that's just a different mentality, because the dogs would do it, but they would not necessarily always do it willingly, whether that be the retrieve, whether that be, the recall methodology, whether that's hear or come or whatever word people use. They just don't, they will fight you on these things versus just looking at when we're communicating, which we don't use a lot of vocal communication in the field. But when we are communicating it, hey, something's going on here, and I need to respond positively. So yeah, it's changed a lot. It was probably, I think it was 4 years ago. We had heard of George Hickox, actually, had one of his DVDs, decided to send Josh out to a seminar that was nearby. And Josh came back and said, I really think this will work with our dogs, because the French Brittany is very people oriented, and it likes I don't want to use the wrong term, but it really likes the positive reinforcement, the interaction with the human.
Sure.
On the flip side, they're not as tough as some other dogs, if you want to use that word. They can't take a lot of physical discipline. Now, some can. Every dog's different, but
Sure.
as a breed, as a whole, there's, they don't take that as well as, especially your English pointers and some of your setters
Sure.
Out there. So it's just been, what we found is it's a much better training methodology for us and for our breed.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. And a lot of this, is this from George's playbook?
Yeah.
Okay.
This year was interesting for me because the first couple of years he was teaching us so much of what he calls the foundation.
Okay.
And in my brain, I've trained a lot of dogs. I'm always like, okay, but what else? This can't be it. It's kind of like somebody pours a basement to the house and nobody else shows up to put up walls or anything. You're like, well, get the basement thing, but where do we put
where's the rest of it? Where's the rest of it?
So yeah, this year we did a little differently. Rather than have George come in and out because of the high price of fuel and so on and so forth, he said, well, it doesn't make any sense anyway, because I'm going to be gone for 3 days. I'll just stay the whole period. So we had the first Upland Academy for the advanced group, and spent that with George. But then we spent, Monday through Thursday with George, just us. Mm. And we started getting so much more into some of the tools that, we had found and used over the years before, but we had never seen those as part of George's program earlier. And what started that whole thing was the conversation around, okay, I get this. What's next? I need to know, how do I take it from here to finish dog inside of what you think is your program, George, so we can do a better job of that.
Yeah.
Well, it ended up being a lot of the things we had done before anyway, but with the foundation of the positive reinforcement, it was a lot easier to work with the dogs towards those ends,
That's fantastic.
And your question about, do I always have to give them a treat? No, if I'm teaching them to whoa, if they do a good job, I can just, scratch their back a little bit, rub their head if they like that, and now dog's happy. I did right. Boss gave me a pet, so life's good.
Yeah. That's fantastic. Can you, sorry, we're spending more time on this than I thought, but this is actually really interesting to me. You guys seem to use a lot of the place boards, and is there a particular reason for that? Like, are you seeing, again, different benefits long-term of using place board, or is it just a tool to help build that boldness? And
no, there are a lot of benefits, because you start out with it just being one of the tools in clicker training, so for them to get up on a board, it's kind of funny, because when I think about it, almost everything that we do in clicker training can translate to later training. So you start them out on the board with just no command, just get them to go up on the board, click them and treat them when they're there. Then you start putting a word in place for them to associate a command with that action. So then we start saying place. When they touch the bottle, we say touch. The kennel is obviously kennel. But as we do that, as they get more mature, then we start to lay the whoa word in over it. So, and add the duration to the amount of time they stand on the place board. So we had the 10-week-old puppy this weekend. He would probably stand on that board for 15, 20 seconds, and not all the time. He's a puppy, but you could get him to do that. Now, if you waited much longer than that, he'd start barking for his treat and eventually jump off. But you can see what happens by adding the duration, add the duration, start to build in the whoa command. Well, then if you're first doing, I want him to point in the field and he knows whoa on the board, bring the board out there and set the board in the field and put your scent birds beyond it and have them come out and get on the board, give him the command. He already knows something good's going to happen to me when I do this. And in this case, he gets to see birds.
Wow.
So you just keep associating it forward.
That's fantastic. And then does that make, because George, he'll use the barrels, right? When they're older.
Yep, we use the barrel as well.
Okay. So does that make that transition even smoother as well?
Yes, it does. If you have a dog that you get into the program enough where it will stand aboard, it's not hard to translate that to standing on a barrel. So I'm used to having to go stand still somewhere. Now the barrel is just kind of like the next level of that. And I don't use the barrel for a lot of intense training. I use it more for styling up. So getting them to stop having happy feet when they're on the board, getting them to hold their head up. So, I'm really pointing because I smell something, not because I see something or I'm trailing something, and just having them get into that mode of used to being handled and stand still. which is hard for some dogs.
Oh, sure. Some are like, oh, get me out of here.
Yeah.
I want to move, especially young dogs. Oh, well, that's awesome, Jeff. This was really good. Talk a little bit about, you may have shared this on a couple other podcasts here and there, but give us a little history of Trinity Bretons. Why did you start this? How did it come about? Why the EB? There's so many breeds out there. Why the EB?
The EB was a providential thing. So I had tried several dogs. I actually owned a GSP that was a national futurity winner one year. Didn't have the personality and such I wanted. Josh was a baby at the time, and I knew I wanted my dogs to interact with my kids, and that dog was not the right match for that. So then I sold it, got a couple of American Brits, one from Texas and one from Iowa. The one from Texas, for some crazy reason, ran a lot bigger. But, had the American Brits and was enjoying them. And one Friday night, got a call from a friend of mine. I basically grew up on his parents' farm because they were outdoors people. So every weekend I could get out there, I'd be out there hunting or fishing or doing something. And he was in the Iowa DNR. A guy named Joel Vance, who you might know that name, was in the Missouri DNR. Joel was coming up to hunt. And Joel was also a writer at the time for Pointing Dog Journal, Gun Dog, Shooting Sports. He wrote several articles for several magazines. So anyway, this guy's in a panic. He's stuck in an airport in a snowstorm, can't get back. Asked me if I'd take Joel hunting. I said, sure. So the next morning I met Joel out at his folks' house. We get to the field and I let out my American Brits and he let out his French.
Oh.
So I turn around and I'm looking at those dogs going, well, they look really similar, but there's some different colors and there's some stuff going on here. And so I just, we started talking about it right then and there. What's the difference? Why do you have them? We're, all these things. Really enjoyed hunting behind them and being by the dogs for the next 3 days. And at the end of the time, Joel asked me, hey, what do I owe you? You took me hunting for 3 days. I really appreciate it. What can I do? And I said, there's only one thing I'm going to ask for, but you can't leave until you give it to me. And I said, it's a phone number where I can order some of those. And he gave it to me. And that night I ordered my first brace. Now, for me, I was a hunter first.
Sure.
Okay. So the dogs served the purpose of being my hunting companion, train them to point, retrieve, do, everything I wanted in the field. So that's where I started. And like I said earlier, it was several years later when a friend of mine said, well, why don't you breed, your male to your female so I can have a pup? So bred them. And then kind of as an afterthought, I was like, well, what do I do with all the other puppies?
Right.
And so got some ads out there. They sold relatively quickly. And that was kind of the beginning. And
wow.
We've got several customers on 5th generation puppies right now. And we've got an order for a 6th.
Oh, wow.
So they've had that many dogs from us over the years. So.
Wow. That's incredible. Oh, yeah. That's so fun. We can't not talk about Moose. And I mean, this dog, I've followed his story pretty closely. Josh and I have talked a lot about Moose, but tell us a little bit about this Moose dog. Tell us, I guess, catch us up a little bit on his story and just kind of how he's evolved over the years.
Moose is a fun story because Josh, when he was in college, wanted to get what he really considered his first EB, which is a female that we have. She's one of our yard dogs now, but her name is Tess. And Josh went off to college, took Tess with him, but then he went to be a missionary and dumped Tess off with us. Came back, got his first pastor role in DC. And first part of that, didn't really have a dog out there. Tess stayed with us. And then he decided, I really want a pup out of her. So we bred her, and he was going to, I still remember this day, I want a tricolor male. We bred Tess, who's an orange and white, to a black, orange and white male. All right, great. And I'm whelping the litter, and I'm sitting here going, okay, tricolor, turn it over female. Tricolor, female. Everyone that came out was a tricolor female. Last puppy to be whelped was an orange and white male, which is Moose. The only male in the litter. Oh, wow. The only orange and white. So It was kind of a crazy thing. So Moose was a surprise/accident, if I can say it that way. And he's been a very special dog. I always talk about heart in a dog. People call it drive, whatever. Moose was born with a hunt drive and desire that I probably only seen one other time in the 33 years with the EVs in a dog. And that became very evident when he was 5 months old. We use the term walkabout if we lose a dog in the field, which we don't do very often. But Josh was hunting with a couple of friends, and birds were getting up and people were shooting and everything was going on. And the next thing you know, moose is gone. Gone. Can't find them. They're walking the creek lines. They're trying to figure it out. They're driving around in pickups. Sun setting.
Oh, no.
They're now in panic mode. And so I got a call. This is what's happened. What do we do? I said, leave a jacket or something out in the field, just in case he comes back, which is an old coon hunter's trick. And they came home that night. Josh obviously didn't sleep all night and everything else. As the sun was coming up, we were back on the road to where they were hunting. And we're driving by the place where I was driving the truck. Josh was on the passenger side. A couple of people were in the back. And I said, so where did you park the truck? And he said, well, right over there in that cornfield. I said, oh, right where Moose is sitting? He was like, what? And there's that Moose just waiting for us to come back again.
Oh, gosh. Buy the jacket or no?
Yes.
Okay. Wow.
Right in the same location.
Wow.
So anyway, very special dog. In fact, one of the things, he's got a lot of drive. He's got a lot of run, which is not normal in the breed to see in a lot of dogs. I'm not saying it doesn't exist. There's other breeders out there that have some dogs that have a lot of drive as well. And what I mean by that is to compete at higher levels. So Josh was getting very frustrated early on with Moose because Moose would run a perfect, trial, but the judge wouldn't give him the win because he felt like he ran too big. Well, okay, but the dog's in control, found the bird, held it. What do you want? It's the dog's kind of natural ability.
Sure.
And so when Josh moved out east, there weren't many of those field trials out there. So we started going to field trials where they did different things. So in the AKC world, they offer, hunt tests, foot hunting trials, but then there's also the horseback. And so kind of gradually went up the steps and Moose kept doing better and better. And that culminated last fall and I'm just going to call it a surprise miracle. He was down with the pro that's handling him in some of those trials, and he's at an American field. Now, American field trial is like a whole nother level.
Yeah.
So this is where, dogs like Bolt and, Tried and True and all these dogs run. It's the big dog world.
Yeah.
And the handler called and said, I'm going to be here for a week. And if I don't put him down ever, he's not even going to get trained all week long because I can't train on the trial grounds. He said, if you want me to, I can enter him in and throw him in a stake and, at least he can get out and practice, so to speak.
Sure.
And he went out and won. So first time an EV has ever done that.
And he beat some big running pointers too, didn't he?
Yeah, he did.
I saw, Josh told me about that.
We teased George a lot in the last 10 days. We're the first people to ever, breed and train an EV that outperformed the Hickox pointer. So
that is
actually two of them in there.
Crazy.
Now, that being said, Moose is not the normal dog. Like I said, I've seen two like that probably in the entire time. Now, I like that. Some people, honestly, we kind of breed for two different types of dogs right now. And I'm trying to find where the center line is in those two types. But a lot of people, hey, I want Fluffy, me and the wife and the kids, and I want them to hunt twice a year. Okay. That is not Moose.
Sure. That's very different.
And Moose is a good house dog, but that is not him. He would go crazy if that's the level of activity he had. Yeah. On the flip side, we have a lot of people that want to hunt or want to learn how to hunt test or trial or whatever it is. Yeah. And we direct them more to the lineage that Moose came out of. And really trying to just always breed a better dog. How do we just keep doing that? So, but yeah, he's definitely special.
That little dog. It's always fun seeing him stacked up in a placement, and you got a couple big old white beautiful pointers, and then there he is, little Moose, the blue ribbon on him, and he is.
Well, and it's kind of funny because Josh gets excited about that too, and then it's like, okay, remember, this is the second one I've seen like this in 30 years.
Right. It's not the norm.
we're not going to have 20 of these running around.
But that kind of makes it cool, though. It does. It's not like every dog is like this. That shows something special.
Yeah, it does.
That is really cool. Do you kind of have any dogs that, I guess, I know you said you've only seen 2 really, but that are maybe potentials that you're excited about right now?
Yeah. So we've, as we breed, and I know we're going to talk more about breeding as we go, but as we breed, I'm always trying to look at how do we make a better dog? That's always my goal. And I've talked to a lot of people, talked to some of the brightest people in our breed, in my opinion. Talked to people outside the breed, the George Hickcoxes, some other folks that are in bigger arenas, that see a lot more dogs and study a lot more lineages just in the EB. How do we do that? How do we make that go forward? And we have started to put into place the program. So how do I evaluate a puppy? How do I evaluate a litter? How do I see what this dog threw? Where does that take me in our breeding program? Is that a step forward? Same step? If we ever see a step back, we're done very quickly. And just keep moving that ball forward. And I don't, I want to say too much about that at this moment, because I know you want to ask me some questions, but that's kind of how we breed forward. So out of that right now, we've got 2 young females, and we've got some friends that have some males out of a breeding we did last fall that turned out phenomenal. I think a majority of that litter would have, I don't know if they would have Moose's potential, but definitely much closer to that, if I can say it that way.
Sure.
We have a dog, Moose's daughter, Ani, who I absolutely love, and we'll talk more about her in a little bit, but she's got the fire in her belly. We just never really went to do that with her. But the more I work with her, the more I see she's got that type of desire where if you had stretched her out in the beginning, she could have, maybe not as big as Moose, but darn close.
Yeah.
And personally, I'm not so concerned about, Moose naturally will run as far as you let him. Now he likes that game because he can hear you. They call singing to him while he's running. So he knows where you're at, but he can run as much as he wants, so to speak.
Yeah.
And not all dogs will run that same distance. On the flip side, what I'm looking for is what we call questing in a young age. When I drop that dog on the ground and let it go, I want that dog to just be on fire to hunt.
Yeah.
I like to use the term, angels in the home, devils in the field. And I mean that. I want them to be in the field tearing it up.
Yeah.
I do some judging, and there's times where I get frustrated when I judge a whole battery of dogs and most of them are within 20 yards and just kind of plodding along. And it's kind of like, that's all you want. I can send you to some other breeds.
Sure.
I won't name those breeds right now.
Right.
Not that I don't love those breeds, but that's, it's kind of like having a flusher.
Yeah.
And so if you want to cover more ground, have more fun, get more points out of your dog, which, a lot of us enjoy that as much as everything else, in the hunt. You got to let that dog be that dog. You've got to teach them to go out there and explore. And then if you have to, if you're saying, hey, I'm going to go hunt, the grouse woods in Wisconsin, I want to keep my dog close. You got to know how to tighten that up.
Sure.
Which can be done as well. But I would rather tighten them up. My guy asked me that, why do you always pick the boldest puppies? Yeah. And I said, because I'd rather rein a horse in than have to whip them to go.
Yeah.
I said, it's always hard to push them out. It's much easier to pull them back into you.
Yeah. I've heard that many times from old timers that have been doing this longer than I've been alive, saying that is such a key thing. And people need to just let them be puppies, let them be bold and go explore and not, calling them back to you every couple seconds. And, so that's a true statement. One thing I was going to ask you before we get into the breeding, I know we keep dancing around the, the breeding question, but last thing I was going to ask about, like you getting into trials, and it sounds like you've done some judging it as well.
Yeah.
What was that drive for you to go down the trial route or the hunt test route? Was that really just because of the breeding you were doing? You wanted to kind of start to see and compete with your dogs, or what was that for you?
Yeah. Like I said to you earlier, I'm really more of a hunter than anything else. Love to hunt, big game hunt, small game hunt, bird hunt, love to fish. Yeah. So for me, it started out as a hunting thing. And then as we went along down the pathway, early on, I did a little bit of trialing, dabbled in it a bit. And then later on, as my sons grew older, they were like, how come you don't do that anymore? Because I had drugged them along to some trials when they were young. I was like, well, 5 kids, didn't have a lot of time. didn't want to be gone every weekend. So, but they wanted to go and try to get into it again. And then we started finding out, hey, this really gives us a level of evaluation of how we're doing compared to other kennels. So if you're on the ground comparing all these, you can say, okay, yeah, we're where we want to be, or, we like our dogs better than what we see here.
Sure.
So we know we're at least on the right pathway. And that just kind of led us forward. And I think now we're probably even more selective about that than we were a few years ago. A few years ago, we might have had 6 dogs between our handling and our pro handling, on the ground at any point in time. Now we're much more selective over, okay, who do we think, really has the potential that we're looking for? And then do we want to trial that dog or not? We may not. Some of the evaluations we did last week with George is, hey, I think these 2 could, so let's keep pushing them in that direction. This one we're going to hold back and turn into a hunting dog, which is not a bad thing. It's just you see different qualities in them. So, those 2 will be the easiest to work with to the end of trialing, and this one will be easier to work into just a hunting dog, and so you do that with them.
That's great. And the last thing, are you running in just AKC horseback trials, walking trials, UKC?
We do UKC walking. We will do, I'm trying to encourage more of the AKC walking. I just think that's a venue that's not used enough. And the horseback we're pursuing somewhat, although that's really going to be only for an extra special dog like a moose.
Sure.
I look at that as being a bit outside of what we want to do in our breed. And, I get the phone calls both ways. I get the phone calls, hey, that's awesome. Congratulations. And I get the other phone call. What in the heck are you doing? We want foot hunting dogs in this breed, and it's kind of And, I try to explain that, hey, let the dog be the dog.
Sure.
There'll be a day in Moose's life when he slows down and we hunt behind him.
Sure.
Not yet.
Right.
It will happen.
Yeah.
And, some dogs never get that kind of drive. But yeah, so,
That's good.
I really wanted us to gravitate. UKC bought American Field, so their whole game is going to change.
Right.
We don't know what that looks like yet. But figure out that game, figure out the AKC walking, and then we have something that's extra special. We'll move into the horseback.
That's very cool. I love it. Well, breeding, big old hairy animal of breeding. And I know there's lots of different ideas and philosophies and methods, I'm sure, but give me an overview, I guess, to start of your, like your breeding philosophy. And then we'll dive a little deeper into some things. Okay.
Yeah. Like I said earlier, so the rabbit hole concept comes from Alice in Wonderland. Our last child was a daughter. So, I got to do all the Alice in Wonderland fun things with her. And that's where the term came from, is if you pursue something down that hole, you don't know where you're going. Breeding can oftentimes be that way. And what I've learned as a breeder over the years, early on, we didn't have a lot of gene pool. So you kind of had what you had. There weren't that many dogs in the States. I mean, between myself in Iowa, Joel was in Missouri. A friend of mine was up in South Dakota. That's all the guys I knew that had them for a while, And as that pool grew, we started to get more options. You could breed different ways. You looked up different lines. We started importing some dogs from France, just trying to continue the evaluation. And growing up in a farming community, knowing how, and I'm just going to use cattle people, but how they pursue a line. Why are you pursuing that line? Well, it produces the best. It's got the best calving ease. It's got whatever their list of criteria is, that's a line that really appeals to them. And they might cross that out with something, a good friend of mine, and he's now my son's father-in-law. They raise some cattle and they cross some Angus with some Gelbvieh, try to get out, the best producing, the best meat they can get. So you look at those things and you say, okay, what is it that we're really after? Okay, I really like a bulldog. I like a dog that will hunt with me all day. And I want a dog that's very biddable, so easy to train. And in the beginning, I really like colorful dogs. I like the black and whites and the tricolors and so on and so forth. And so I wanted to throw some color in there. As we've gone along, and Josh teases me about this all the time, more and more when we evaluate the dogs, the orange and whites end up winning. So they end up better structure, better style, better boldness. So as we keep going forward, we keep seeing that. And so for us, then we settled in on, we narrowed it down to a couple of lines, and we were really looking at having both and then having them be complementary. And now we've kind of gotten down to one line that we will bring in outcross into, but keep a focus on one line. Doesn't mean, Titus to Test to Moose to Ani. It doesn't mean, trying to peg it that closely, but saying this bloodline is the one we're pursuing.
Kind of like sorry to cut you off. So kind of like your main line, you're saying, your staple. Okay.
Yep. That's our foundational line that we're holding on to and saying, we like these dogs and we like what they produce. And we like, and some friends of ours have some of that line running through their kennel. So we might use their stud on one of our females or whatever, but staying as close to that line as we can. And, it's really interesting. You get into this, and I knew this quote was out there, but I couldn't find it. I finally found it actually early this morning. So Wright was guy, Wright COI came from Dr. Wright. And, he always thought about the two consequences of inbreeding. Now, I'm not saying we inbreed, but just his theory around this whole coefficient of inbreeding thing was, one is positive because it gives you uniformity and prepotency. Two is it can be negative because you can have loss of vigor and loss of fertility. So those are the two main highlighted things that he did in all his studies and all his work. And I think that's very, very true. But if you know that those are the things that are out there, the consequences of that, then it's how do you manage that? If that makes sense.
Yeah, that does. That does for sure. Okay. One of the things I think will be an important question for me to ask before we go deeper with COI. Can you explain the basic difference so a term is called line breeding, right?
Yeah.
So line breeding, I guess, what is that first? Let's name that. And then how is that different than COI?
Okay. So, I'm going to throw one in there on top of that. Okay. So you have inbreeding, breeding extremely tight. So it is line breeding, kind of 2.0, if you want to call it that. So, but some of the best dogs ever produced have been produced by doing that because the positives far outweighs the negatives, weighed the negatives in those particular breedings. Okay. So, for example, way back in the French Brittany's, there was a dog named Minnie, and she was bred twice to her son, which sounds like incredibly close, but produced some of the best dogs ever. Wow. Okay. So somebody took a gamble, tried it, produced amazing dogs that then continued to produce great dogs years afterwards. The same things have been done in pointers. I know they've been done in setters, where somebody takes that gamble because I see so much that I really like that I come back and I'm going to get as close to that as possible and see if it still improves or do I go off the rails, do the main negatives that Dr. Wright talked about pop up, or am I still getting the positives?
Gotcha. Okay.
And so, inbreeding is really when you get that close. Okay. Line breeding is saying, so let's just say 20 years from now, somebody looks back and goes, man, I want to get more of those Trinity dogs. Well, the Trinity dog doesn't mean one or two. We've had and created a number of dogs. So you go out there and say, okay, well, I like that one from that line, and I like that one from that line, I like that one from that line. I'm going to put that together because I really like that line. So they're related, but not so tight that you're really calling it inbreeding. You know what I'm saying?
Okay. So within the same, let's just call it a family, I guess.
Yes.
In the Trinity family, you might use dog X with dog Z. They're somewhat related, but there might be a couple generations between them.
Yep. Okay. Yeah. Couple generations, or you might have taken a parent from the same line that hadn't been in that line before. We just did that. We kept two puppies out of it, and the rest of them went to, close customer friends. Okay. Where those dogs were just amazing. But it was a dog that we knew had the blood of that line in it. Okay. But we had never bred to him before. We knew his lineage. So we said, hey, he was actually 11, I think, when we did the breeding. Before he gets too old, we want to grab one breeding out of that and see what it makes. Well, it worked. Wow. It was just the perfect, going back a little farther and grabbing that, bringing it back up into the current day stuff. Yeah. Really made the current day pop again.
So in, I guess, to be more example, so you could have, let's say there's a dog named whatever, Joe. You could use Joe's great grandparent maybe and breed that dog back. Okay. That would be considered line breeding.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Fantastic.
not as close. And, it's a very interesting game because then you get what I call is the people that are running away from those things. Okay. So a lot of the people that are very focused on COI, I want to have a low COI. I want to have a low COI. Well, what do you get then? Okay. Well, now it's totally not related. So we have no idea. Okay. So I really like my dog, Joe. We'll go back to your Joe dog. And, Bob over there, man, his Katie, she's beautiful. So let's just breed them. Okay. And then I get the calls. I bred these two dogs. They both look great. But puppies vary in size all over the place. And I get 2 underbites and one's got a white patch on his eye, which is a disqualifier in our breed. What happened? Well, I call those, the alphabet soup.
Because they weren't connected at all, right?
They're not connected at all. You throw everything in a pot and what comes out, you might get some A's, you might get some Z's, so just know that you have no idea because you have no consistency in your breeding. Yeah.
That's a good analogy right there.
Yeah. If you look at the cattle guys, they never go do something like that.
Yeah.
They might go, well, that one's not quite working, but there's this other bull from Germany that's of the same line. Let's try him. It's never, hey, let's just go totally off the reservation. Let's go get a buffalo, and bring it in. It's been done, I know, but it's like, no, you don't think that way. How do I make this to make the best dog possible? And I'll be honest with you, since we have really refocused on that, the results have been amazing.
Really?
I mean, we had dogs at this clinic that were puppies last year, so they're just coming on a year. And I mean, honestly, other than the guys listening about, hey, just take a breath, slow down, don't try to make your dog a finished dog by year one. That you don't have to, they don't need that as a dog, and it's harder on them, but some of those dogs are really ready for that type of training. And they're not even a year old yet.
Wow. That's incredible. Okay. So there's inbreeding we talked about, there's line breeding, and then where does COI fall, and give us an overview? So
COI is kind of a measure of that, if I could say it that way. So it's what COI is talking about is how closely related are the dogs when you breed them. Okay. So I actually went and found this a while back and I printed off a copy. So if you have siblings, so both parents are the same, your coefficient of inbreeding would be 25. And this is in Wright's calculation. There are different calculations for COI as well. Then it goes down from there. Now, a really interesting thing is he included in his study, if you could do a self-fertilization or clones or identical twins, his opinion was that it would be a 50% COI. Okay. So you'll hear, and I see on the internet and all these other things about, I want to make sure my COI is below 10 or below 5 or whatever. Well, that just means you're getting farther and farther and farther away from having anything related. So we just talked about the alphabet soup breeding and getting closer and closer and closer to, I have no idea what I'm going to produce. They might be fantastic. They might be terrible. They might be both. Now, people will say the same argument. If you get too close in what I would truly call inbreeding, or maybe even on the outer fringes of line breeding, you might start to see some things you don't like. But what that's telling you as a breeder is that's too hot, back off, so don't do that close. On the flip side, running to the other end of the spectrum gives you have no idea what you're getting. And that's what most people forget when they start just chasing a low COI. You're
getting farther from what you like and the traits that you want to see.
Yeah. And COI is an interesting measure as well, because, and I tried to find this article before we talked, but I didn't get a finger back on it. But one of the guys that did a lot of study on this, and I've read the article multiple times, he said COI is great as a predictor. So saying, hey, if I breed these two dogs, this is kind of how they relate up, how their relationship looks in a COI formula. That's great. But think about your kids. Okay. Your kids come from the same lineage, obviously, every one of them, same mom and dad, same thing, everything, same. Do they all look exactly the same? Do they all act exactly the same?
Nope.
Do they all even have the same coloration? Eyes, hair, so on and so forth. It's so what happened? My COI not work? Think about it in a litter of puppies. And we see this a lot in the French breedings because you get a lot of different colors. I have had litters where the liver and white, orange and white, black and white, and tries. Well, how does that happen if all of those puppies COI is 5? So there's a whole nother level of COI that you have to go into if you really want to understand it, but it would also be very expensive and take a lot of time to do if you really did it. But every puppy theoretically has a different DNA COI. So what's truly their makeup and how does it relate to other puppies?
Wow.
And what this person was saying is in the studying they were doing, they were believing they were seeing anywhere from in the same litter from like a 7% to a 20% COI in the DNA.
Wow.
Not in the calculation style.
So not as a litter as a whole, but in the individual puppy.
Correct.
Wow.
Correct. Which is why I gave the example of kids first. You can see it and you know it. If you have a bunch of kids, we had 4 boys first. Some people say they look a lot like brothers. Some say not really. 2 of them had really blonde hair for a long time. 2 of them didn't. One's 6'3", one's 5'10" or 11. So there's different builds. A couple of them are real thin, a couple of them are bigger. Yeah. So what happened? Well, that's the DNA makeup. That's what happens there.
Wow.
So it's just very, very interesting. As you walk through it, it's not just as easy of if I just do Wright's calculation, I'm fine. That can blow a whole lot of things up. Now, it can be an indicator. If I'm a breeder and I don't know anything, and somebody says to me, "Well, you want to stay below whatever number," I can use that to make sure I do that. But we still go back to the question of why.
Yeah.
And a good friend of ours, a gentleman named Butch Nelson, who's been around dogs his whole life and been around EBs for a long time, he was out this spring for our spring trial series and got to spend a lot of time with him. And I had a deep conversation with him about this because my opinion is, you should be line breeding. Doesn't mean you don't ever bring in something to loosen the line back up a little bit again. We need to do that. But what happens between the two? And he's done a lot of different types of dogs, bear dogs, mountain lion dogs, bird dogs. I mean, he has been around it and trained about everything. He said, if you don't have a purpose in your breeding program and you're not trying to follow at least some sort of a lineage, it's not worth doing. That you're just chasing, it's basically like chasing the wind. You don't know what you're going to get. Even if you get it one time, you don't know what you're going to get another. Yeah. A live example of that is one of the best running males in the nation is out there right now, and beautiful dog. Had the opportunity to judge him a few times. But I also know in the back of my head that as beautiful as he is, he's got a few siblings that aren't quite so much. So then your head goes into, okay, what happened with that breed? Yeah. And so we get very specific, not only in the line, but saying, okay, but this dog in the line carries these attributes that we really like. Yeah. So we're going to add that one in, even if it's not of our kennel. Yeah.
Okay. So COI, in a summary of kind of a overview, it's kind of an in-between of a line breeding and inbreeding, right? Because it's showing you.
It's an indicator.
It's an indicator showing you how close you're going to get or how not close you're going to get, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. And it's
and
like
based
I said, on. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. So like based on Wright's calculations, what you mentioned, he kind of has a percentage, right?
Yes.
But then you as a breeder, you using the COI method, I guess, are you kind of then experimenting? Okay, we're going to go a little lower, a little higher than his range. Okay.
Absolutely. And so Dog Breeder Pro is one of the products we use. We keep our dogs' information in there, and they allow you to go in and do, trying to remember if they call it sample matings or what they, it's like hey, if we bred these 2 dogs, what happens, which will give you a COI and some other things. And we use that a lot just to look at it. And I'm probably a bit riskier even than Josh is, but I'm doing that because I was talking about Bush, who was encouraging us, keep doing this, and he actually said to me, I think you're the only EB kennel in the US that has this type of focus on doing this and making a better dog. And so with a lot of encouragement, as we pursue that, we do use it a lot. And we see, okay, that one we did, and that was great. Okay, now, do you dare take the next step is a question. It's going to be a little hotter if you go back into that again. So do you do that? I like where I'm at. I'll use that male and that female again and just stay there. And we've not done anything that's super, super close, parents to offspring or siblings or anything like that. We've not done it. not dared to yet, but it does encourage me that, all these people that have been around it for a long time and are very knowledgeable are like, yeah, you've got to do what you're doing.
Yeah.
Or like I said earlier, you don't know what you're going to get.
Yeah. I guess, can you give me an example of a successful COI breeding that you did? Maybe had a little higher COI percentage. And what were some of the things, I guess, that you saw that you went, oh, that, I guess first tell me, like, what was the goal maybe of a certain breeding? Yeah. And then what did you see that confirmed, hey, that was what we wanted?
Okay. So in our program, we've got some good looking females, like them, but I always want some structure to my dogs. I don't like spindly legged, fine boned, because I don't feel like they hold up as well in the field. And that's my first goal, is the field.
Sure.
So we were talking about this. And we have a female that we really like, and she's prepotent, which we'll get to that in a minute. Don't forget to ask me about that.
Yes.
But we know she throws great puppies. So we went and said, okay, what can we put with her that personally we could keep some females out of and hope they end up being what we want them to be? And, like I said, some of our customers who have become friends that were waiting for the next puppy, the rest of them could go to them, and we could keep an eye on it. Okay, so we can watch this as they grow up. What do they turn out to be? What do they look like? Did we get what we want? So on and so forth. So we went ahead and did that. His name is Hank, that some friends of ours from South Dakota own. And we bred the two. And, very few times do I say lightning really strikes, but that litter's amazing. In fact, we were going to go back to another dog of the same line, from the same friends, but not related at all, just of the same lineage. And we're debating now, do we go back to him or we go back and do this one more time, just because of how good it's turning out.
Yeah.
What did it give us? It gave us the build we like. It gave us more bone structure. And the interesting thing is I love Hank, but he isn't known for producing great females. But when we paired him with our prepotent female, the females are fantastic. Wow. Some of the best we've ever made. And so we're really excited as we do things like that to say, man, that wasn't an overly hot, but it was hotter than some people would like breeding. Yeah. But yet what it produced was just absolutely amazing.
And you may have mentioned this. I was actually writing down prepotency. And I hope I spelled it in my outline. So the female that you bred with Hank, did she have the bone structure you liked?
Yes.
Okay. So she had
it. Okay. She has the bone structure I like. I wanted a little bit more structured head on her, but she's probably my number one female right now in my kennel.
Oh, wow.
So really like her, like her personality, like her drive, like her build, so when you start stacking that up, now can we repeat that? Well, we did. And we made it better in the process. So really excited about that litter. And we just didn't know at the time. I really liked the dog. I knew his lineage. I was kind of like, we got to do that before he gets too old, just to at least see, is it what we think it is?
And I guess were your hesitations because it was a higher COI maybe than you?
It was a little bit higher COI. We knew what we were going back to.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, like I said, he had not produced as many great females as he produced a lot of great males. And I owned one for a significant period of time and still have people come back with those puppies saying, these males are such great dogs. And they're nice, big bone structure, good heads, nice dogs. So, the hesitancy was, do we try it? Don't we try it? And I really wanted to, so we went and did it.
Yeah.
And it's not crazy,
Sure.
It's nothing like I'm getting close to 20 or anything like that. But it was just, it felt right.
Yeah.
Thought we could get the right attributes if our theory behind her prepotency was correct, and it showed through.
Okay. Prepotency is the next question. But first off, with that example again, what was the risk factors that you were?
Well, the risk factors, you come out and you don't get consistent size. You don't get the head structure you want. You don't get the personality you want. I only know Hank from being around him some, I don't know him overall as a dog. You have to consider all those things. You really don't know until you breed them, but it's proving out the theory of even being related, even though if it's not, tight, but being related and having some of the same lineage allowed us to really throw some great pups.
That's cool. Okay. What does prepotency mean?
So prepotency is something that I rarely hear about anymore. And I heard about it from, the guys when I was young, the Delmer Smiths. Trying to remember the name of the trainer that was out in Nebraska right now. It's slipping my mind, but those guys used to talk about prepotency. And it's really funny because when I went back to find this quote from Dr. Wright, one of the things he mentions in that quote is prepotency. And I didn't remember that. But what prepotency tells you is I can breed this dog to other dogs and it will always throw better forward. It will take what it has and carry it forward, and the dogs coming from it will be great. So George's dog, Bolt, which just got retired this year, Bolt's got 7 or 8, pups, dogs out on the circuit now, which is unusual for one sire to have a crew like that going forward, which would lend me, I haven't studied Bolt enough, but would lend me to believe he's probably got some prepotency in him. And people don't talk about that much anymore, I don't think, because I think we get all wrapped up around COI and where's this, and I like COI as an indicator, but don't make it your whole game plan, So how do I use other things? So right now we have 2 dogs in our kennel, and which is the most I've ever had in the kennel at one time. But Ani, who we bred to Hank, that we just talked about that litter, every litter out of her is good dogs. I mean, it's, and I'm sure even in prepotency at some point in time, I'm going to see something I don't like, but it hasn't happened yet. If I breed her to a dog, it comes better. Wow. It carries forward. The same is true about moose. And I wasn't even thinking about prepotency anymore until we had an accident after the South Dakota Nationals a couple of years ago, got home, had an old dog running around the yard, liked her bloodline and everything else as well. But she had a few litters for us and then just stopped going in the heat. We didn't know why. We didn't know she was sterile. Vet said there wasn't anything wrong with her, but she never cycled. So we get out of the truck. It's cold, snowy, everything else, and let Moose out. And it wasn't 30 seconds later, we hear this yell. And so we're figuring, some of Moose's stories. Moose is in trouble again. We got to go bail him out of something. Right. So we go running around the side of the shed, and here he was tied to this old female that had basically become our yard dog. Oh, wow. I was like, that's weird. I hadn't even seen her go into heat for a long time, let alone thought, nothing will ever come of it. So, unpacked everything. Josh got in his truck, away he went. That was it. Didn't think a whole lot of it. And about 63 days later, I'm walking through the shed one morning and I'm thinking, I hear this squeaking noise.
Oh my gosh.
And I go over to her kennel and here she's all wrapped up in a ball and there's 3 little puppies. Those pups came out amazing. And she is a female that I really like her bloodline, but I wasn't always fond of her structure. Little slight of a head, little fine boned. And one of her sons that we use for a stud now he is a big, structured male. Wow. And that's when the light first went on in my head. I bred that to that. I get that. Wow. So now I'm going to try to breed Moose to something else. What do I get? And he continually does the same thing. He throws what I call forward. He takes his genetic pool and it gets better when you breed him with something else. And it almost doesn't matter what. Wow. So so prepotency is more of a term you use. It's not a formula. It's not, it's just saying. I have not found a formula yet. If I knew of one, I would be using it. No,
it's just kind of something you say, hey, Moose breeds to whatever, and it's going to be great. Okay.
And I remember, the guys like Delmer and those guys talking about whenever they got a dog like that, they used that dog to the full extent because they knew that dog was going to make better dogs than even what they, And
so here's the question. Here's the question. Have you bred Moose to Ani ever?
No, because that's a father-daughter.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah. And the interesting thing is, if I look back at Moose's mom, if we had tracked it at all, we probably would have felt the same way about her. So something is carrying forward, with that line. But yeah, we're excited about it because I've never had 2 at one time that were truly prepotent, in my mind, where I could just breed them to anything and the pups are going to come out fantastic. Yeah. But you also have to be very careful with that because now what do? I'm not just breeding any dog to Ani. Moose is a little easier because he doesn't have to carry the pups. He can breed, as many as he wants, but very purposeful breedings. And when I think about how do I use Moose, they're very purposeful breedings. They're not, hey, let's just breed them to
sure. You're being very intentional with that.
Yeah.
what, I guess, what is males versus females? What is your take on, I guess, the importance level of a female versus a male? Like a lot of people I hear will, oh, it's all about the male. It's all about the stud dog. They I don't know, or throw the best or whatever. Like, what is your take on males versus females in your breeding program?
It's interesting because I've done reading on it where a lot of people will say, up to 60% of the makeup of the litter comes from the female. So it's not even a 50-50 split. Some will say even higher. If I go back, genetically, I think sometimes it does depend if it's a male or a female, what carries forward, so which are they carrying the X or the Y forward, and how is that influencing the development of that puppy? Oh boy. To me, it's, what has carried forward the best, other than in Tess and Ani, has been the males, not scientific, just
sure, just what you've seen.
What I've seen. With those two females, I would say that their genetics are dominating the breedings, which is probably why they're throwing forward better dogs.
Sure. Okay. So it sounds like you're, again, tell me what you're using, but you're not just using COI and that's it. That's your only indicator. You're kind of really doing a very holistic, it sounds like, evaluation of your breeding program. Is that true?
Yes. Even inside the lines that we like, we found that one dog back in that lineage does not produce as nice of pups as if he's not there. So when we're looking for the pedigrees, we try to stay away from that dog, and some of that you start to find as you do the repeat breedings. So I will start playing with it with the concept in my mind. Then we'll look at the COI, and then we'll go from there into, okay, what attributes are we trying to bring forward? So does this breeding look like it has that? Okay. And if it does, then we proceed forward. But yeah, a bunch of us were together for 10 days, and that was one of the hot topics, especially with the Ani Hank litter now. A friend of ours from north of us here, a couple hours, has one of those males. So now you got that male available as well. And you start to have these different things available that all fit together with the puzzle really well. Okay. How do we do a better job of building up to the next generation of dogs?
Yeah. With COI, talk to someone, let's say someone out there, maybe they're starting a kennel or starting a breeding program. Like, where do you start? Like, where would you start with this? And how do you kind of start getting some of these formulations and that?
Yeah. So just so everybody understands, because we keep saying COI, coefficient of inbreeding. So how closely related are the dogs that are being bred? And, the first thing I would do is just try to go out. I mean, we're blessed right now. We can type in anything in Google and go find it. Go out and do some studying on what does it mean? What does it say? But you also have to form some opinion, okay? Because there's people out there in the dog world that will say, oh my gosh, your COI should never be above 5. Well, that just means like you're not very related. So what are you trying to gain by doing the breeding? There's other people that are like, hey, if you're not pushing the envelope upwards of 20, you're not breeding close enough to get the goodness really out of the dogs. So you got to take opinion out of what you're reading and try to get to data, if I can say it that way, and just understand it. And in my brain, I don't know that we really understand the DNA data yet. I know there's some people out there that are chasing that, but like I said earlier, if you throw a litter of puppies and they're all different, which they always are, what is, something's not the same in the coefficient of inbreeding, which leads you to the DNA coefficient, which tells you exactly how much pulled through each puppy. But I think COI needs to be understood, but like I said earlier, it's an indicator. It's not an absolute at all for us, And if I actually had the right dog and things were great and it wasn't closely related, but for some reason he, looks like the dogs we want, everything else, would I ever try that breeding? I would, but I would also have in the back of my head that I got to watch that breeding just as closely because it might throw everything good and bad under the sun as well,
Gotcha.
So and breeding really, in my mind, is a thought process. It's developing a program. It's saying, how is this working? It's throwing it off some of the smarter people, that have been around longer than we have and say, hey, this is what we're doing. Does this make sense to you? And And does it hold true to what you've done? And, give us some suggestions. What else should we look at or try? And we've got a lot of affirmation about people just saying, at least you're, even if something doesn't turn out perfect, at least you're doing a process to try to get there.
Yeah, it's a process. It's going to be different than maybe someone else's, but you're putting in the intentional work to try to take all the things you're learning, all the COI, line breeding, your opinions, and what you see, and kind of pushing it together. Sounds like, and making your own judgment based on what you want. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
If someone pinned you against the wall and said, "All right, what's the sweet spot percentage for a coefficient in breeding?" What's like the? I know this might be a tough one for you.
This is because, if I had known you were going to ask me that one, I would have looked up about 20 of my favorite dogs and their COIs this morning. But to me, I think part of it will depend on the line in relationship to COI, and part of it will just have to depend on your level of comfortability. So, we've done some COI breedings that were, up above 10%. Okay. And we have not run into an issue. Now, that's not saying we never will. We will probably at some point in time do a breeding and go, "Oh, we can't do that anymore." That was too close to the edge. But I think it's much above the 5%. If you're at 5%, I was just looking at my little cheat sheet here. When you get down below 6%, you're like half granduncle to a half grandniece. And so, half first or second cousins, that type of thing. And you start getting those really low COIs, the breedings that I've seen out of those lead me not to have any desire to do that.
Just because there's not enough connection. There's not enough of those traits that are going to carry over.
I mean, we've helped some people get their kennels started. We've worked with people in their kennels over years. And so we've seen a lot more litters than just ours. And when I think back on those litters and I see what people have done, I tease some of the younger guys, it's quit chasing the shiny penny. Just because a dog won last week doesn't mean he's going to add anything to your breeding program. You got to evaluate much more than that, get much deeper into it. But seeing all those litters has also allowed me the opportunity to say, okay, you're trying to keep that COI as low as possible, but look what you're getting. You got a great big puppy and two little tiny ones, and the rest of them are kind of in the middle. You're getting underbites, you're getting whatever, too spindly. They're not built well enough, in my opinion. And if you don't know those things, you don't know what you're breeding for, then how are you ever going to get there? You just don't know what you're going to get.
Yeah. And when you say what you're breeding for, do you mean basically whoever's doing the breeding, whether it's a kennel or whatever, having a focused goal in mind? Like, hey, what are you going to do with these dogs? Is that what you mean?
Yes. And I don't mean just this litter now. I mean, what is your view? Where are you trying to go? So for example, right now we're collecting moose. He's I think he just turned 6 last week, but he's 6 years old. So, some people might say that's a little early, but we really like what we see and what he's produced. So we're trying to make sure that we can keep that gene pool around as close as possible for as long as possible. What's the purpose of doing that? Well, we know when we breed moose to somebody, puppies come out better, structure comes out better, drive comes out better. So why would we not?
Yeah.
So in my brain, it's almost the opposite question versus just saying, I know people buy tricolor puppies, so I'm going to breed this tricolor male to this tricolor female. All you're chasing is color. You're chasing the wrong thing. It's just not a good place to be, because what genetically are going to be? What's their hunt drive? Is there any structural issues? All these things need to come to play and be thought about versus just random breeding.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. Oh my goodness. My head is about to explode in a good way, though. This is so good, Jeff. What are some litters you have maybe coming up this year, or even in a couple of years that you're thinking through that you're excited about?
Yep. We're going to breed a young dog, whose name is Rhea. She's from France, back to moose. That'll happen sometime this fall. Ani, we're going to be breeding either back to the litter that just produced a bunch of great dogs, or to a related, but not same male, named Jim. So that'll be another litter. And we'll keep pups out of both of those litters. I know we will. You know, there'll be litters that we take farther down the pathway, do more evaluation, more training before we sell them. So we know exactly what the litter produced and what we want out of the litter. So those two are coming up. Those are going to be fantastic litters. We've got some young females coming up that I'm really looking forward to breeding and seeing, you know, hey, this breed produced a really nice looking, good personality, great drive female. What does she throw next? And then we're also going to go back and, you know, we've got, it's an interesting line because out of the same line, you can get some dogs that are just so full of drive, you know, they just can't hardly stand still in life. And the whole line likes people. They like their people. And then we get some of them that are just much calmer, you know, but you turn them loose in the field and they still will go after it. They'll still do everything we want them to do. And so trying to cross those two things that we see there inside of the line and breed that. And I think those will be some really nice dogs as well, because I think it's just, you know, we've learned enough to evaluate enough to be able to do that and get the outcome that we're starting to be real confident in our outcome.
That's fantastic. And are you doing more of that where you're keeping puppies for a longer time before you're selling them?
Yeah. We, so a couple things on that. You know, we went and bought dogs from France for several years. 2 males in a row that had a level of hip score and pen hip that we thought was a little bit too high for our liking. So passed them back on. They're both doing fantastic. I'm happy to hear, but, you know, just not for the breeding program. Brought in a female from France. She was too small for my liking, and passed her on. Now, this little one we've got right now, she's a little bit small again, but her structure isn't small. And she comes from an interesting story. We were supposed to get her. She was only the female in the litter, let the owner keep her, and the owner had a life emergency happen and ended up calling us on a spur of a moment saying, would you still be interested? And we said yes. And okay, she's on the plane, go pick her up in, you know, 8 hours.
Wow.
So
oh gosh.
It was kind of a rush deal.
Wow.
She's turned out really nice, got a ton of drive.
Wow.
Just loves life. Just one of those dogs that can't get enough of life, you know? Yeah. So going to breed her to Moose to get that to happen. And so, yeah, you know, there's a lot of that going on.
That's exciting. Well, Jeff, this has been fantastic. I got to get going to work here pretty soon, but I have a couple more closing things for you as we wrap this up. And I just want to say thank you just for sharing the level of detail and just again, just this knowledge and wisdom. I really appreciate when someone can really be intentional with whatever they're working on. That's such a broad thing in all of life, but I know I really enjoy that. And I think the listeners will enjoy that as well. So thank you.
Good.
Talk to the new upland hunter out there. Talk to someone who is listening to this podcast and maybe they're heading into their first season of hunting. Maybe they're picking up their first bird dog soon. What's a piece of advice that you'd give them?
If you're looking for your first puppy, I would look for breeders that have purpose. It's really interesting. A guy told me at the clinic, he said, I buy puppies from you because you guys never have puppies. I was like, what? And he was like, well, what I mean is I can call other breeders and they go, oh yeah, I got 6 out in the backyard that are 4 months old. Okay, why do they still have 4 at 6 months? Sure. Was it that you're training them, you're evaluating them, or you just didn't sell them? You don't necessarily want to be buying there, you know? So look for a good breeder, find a good breeder, and work with them on what you want. You know, hey, I want the boldest dog that you've got for sale, or I want somebody who's not quite got that much drive, because this is what I want to do with them. Just be honest with your breeder. And then once you get the puppy, get started, you know, I would definitely, you know, give us a call. George Hickox is on the road a lot and I won't give out his phone number, but, you know, go get one of his DVDs, but get started on training that puppy immediately. But then don't push it too fast. You know, we live in a drive up window society. I want, you know, a 1-year-old dog finished. I don't have any of those. You know, and I won't push a dog at that age to be finished. And so take your time with your dog, be patient, continue to work with them on positive reinforcements, and you'll end up with a lot better dog than if you try to rush things and do it through a disciplinary method. Oh, that's so good right there. Just don't rush it. So many people. And I was guilty of that with my first dog. My first dog I got, I felt I was always behind and, he was 6 months old. No, he's not doing this. He's not doing this yet. And it takes time. It takes, I think, getting through that first dog to realize, okay, I'm not going to screw that dog up. You know, just take your time, and that's key.
A couple rapid fire questions for you as we wrap this thing up. These are kind of fun. So just kind of give me your off the cuff answer. I might throw in a couple extra ones as well. So,
all right.
For you, Jeff, what came first? The gun, the dog, or hunting?
Hunting.
Hunting. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Favorite breed besides the Epinol Breton?
Ooh. I'm going to give you two really different answers here. I do like pointers, just because of the high tail and the intensity and so on that they have.
Sure.
And, now not going to be a pointer breeder, so don't take that the wrong way. One of my sons wanted to get into his own breed, and he started with wire hair pointing Griffons. And those are wonderful dogs as well.
Oh.
I have been so impressed with their personality, their drive, how easy they are to train because we do some training together. So yeah, really neat breed as well.
Okay. Fantastic. Okay. Back to the EB now.
Yes.
Your color gets talked about so much, and people I'm sure will call you. Josh has told me they'll call you and say, hey, I just want to, try color or something. What is your favorite coloration of the EB?
My favorite coloration would be a black, orange, and white tri.
Yours a black.
Now,
okay.
If you come to my kennel right now, I'm trying to think if I even have one. My son Zach's dog, which isn't in our kennel, but we hunt with him all the time, is the only tricolor dog I have right now.
Okay. Well, and what is the most requested color that you get from clients?
Black tri.
Really?
Yep.
Wow.
Yep. And we're very honest with people. I had a person call right before the clinic, hey, can I come and get a black tricolor male and just go to the clinic? No. He's like, why not? And I said,
it's not Toys R Us.
Yeah. Our waiting list is 40 some people long right now. And if you want a black tricolor male, it'll be longer than that. I said, you're talking a year and a half out. He's like, holy crap. Well, do you know where I can get one and still come to the, I said, I don't.
Why do people get so hung up on color?
I don't know.
Just because what's in their mind and what they want?
Yeah. Well, and I think, I get it. They're pretty. People who buy horses, I want this color of a horse, whatever.
Yeah.
We've gone so much into the functionality of the dog. That those are the things that stack up for us. So we've had litters that have been very colorful, but we evaluate every pup we keep by 8 weeks on a checklist of things that we want to evaluate. And then we will evaluate them again for another 8 to 10 weeks after that to evaluate capability. And at least 9 times out of 10, the orange and whites come out ahead.
Wow.
Yeah. And so it's kind of blown my mind because I was always like, why does that make a difference?
Right. It's going to make them find birds better if they're.
Yeah, that's what the scores tell us, And
I always laughed at that. I remember hearing you and Josh talk about that on another podcast, and I was like, why is that such a thing?
Yeah, it is. It's just crazy.
That's so funny. A couple more for you. Your favorite bird to hunt and why?
My favorite is probably quail, just because I grew up with pheasants and quail. And then quail all but disappeared from our neck of the woods and finally starting to make a little bit of a comeback. I just think they're a very challenging bird to shoot, but if you have a lot of them around, they're a lot of fun as well. You can go shoot a bunch of quail in a day and get a lot of good bird dog work in and everything else.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. What gun are you carrying into the field and why?
Yeah. I just retired a Mossberg 500 that I bought when I was 13 with my newspaper route money.
Wow. Is that a pump?
I do. I just also sold, I had an over-under, a TriStar. I've got a lot of guns. So what one do I carry? Boy, I will tell you this, the Upland Gun Company, I'm working with them right now. I'm going to get at least 1, if not 2 custom guns made because I've learned a lot over the years about a gun has to fit. Why did I carry, especially a Mossberg 500? I know people will make fun of that number, but for that many years, it worked and it fit.
Yeah.
And several of the shotguns I have right now, they stay, in the gun safe because they work and they fit. So, head down that pathway.
That's cool. That's cool. And then last one, beverage of choice after a hunt.
It probably depends on the day, the time, the weather. After doing 10 days in 90 plus degree heat, a cold malted beverage came nicely. When we were hunting grouse in Wisconsin and it was 0 degrees, then either a coffee or an old fashioned. When you get
there you go.
Warm it up one way or another.
Yep.
But yeah, that would be
That's good. That's good, Jeff. Well, awesome. I know you guys have been a supporter of this podcast for a long time, so thank you for that. But for someone listening, what's the best way to get in touch with you, Josh, your kennel, if they have questions or want to reach out?
We're on Facebook as Trinity Bretons. You can get on our webpage and under Trinity Bretons as well, and find all of our information there. Email is Trinity Bretons, BRETONS @gmail.com. And multiple of those things have both Josh and I's phone numbers. So, and if you give us a call, we don't answer, just say, hey, I'm a dog person and I want to talk to you. We'll get back to you.
That's awesome. I love the reachability.
Yep.
Also the website, I told Josh this last time, the website you guys redid a couple months ago is very nice.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, we redid it. We needed to, so
it looks great.
The old one been around a while.
Yeah, it functions a lot better. So
yep, that's right.
I enjoy it.
Good.
Oh, well, Jeff, thank you again, sir. This was fantastic. I might even break this up into 2 episodes, and this, I think, we'll all walk away learn something from this.
Well, good.
So,
good.
All right.
Thank you so much for what you're doing for the Upland game.
Absolutely. All right, Jeff, you have a great rest of your day, and we'll talk soon.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, that's a wrap of episode 56 with Jeff Ruiter of Trinity Bretons. Jeff, thank you so much for taking the time and breaking down all things related to breeding, the COI, line breeding, methods, development. Really, really insightful. I know I've been very interested in the breeding process and some do's and don'ts and what it all means. So thank you for making it understandable for a lot of, myself included, and a lot of the listeners. Hey guys, don't forget to like us on Facebook, Instagram, and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Just started a YouTube channel not too long ago. I have a couple videos up there, including a review of the Final Rise Sidekick Vest. If you're interested, head over to YouTube and make sure you are subscribed. Don't forget to leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Currently, we're at 140 reviews on Apple Podcasts. Once we get to 200, I will be doing a new giveaway, so we got a little ways to go. Head over to Apple Podcasts, again, 5-star rating system, and then leave a review. Love reading those and the impact that this podcast has had on some of you, so thank you for those that have left one already. Hey guys, season's just around the corner. I hope you're getting excited. Hope you and your dogs are geared up and ready to go. They'll be here before you know it, guys. I'm super excited. I hope your summer is wrapping up well, and I will look forward to talking with you guys next week. Remember, until next time, go put some miles on those boots and follow your favorite bird dog. Take care.